Jackson Show. Hey, Andre. Hey, Linear Bob. Everybody, please join me over there. We're going to be talking about schools. Yes, we're talking about schools. Why are we talking about schools? Because they're reopening. They're reopening. We've got 300,000 teachers and paraprofessionals who will not be there. I think that you should be concerned about where we are sending all of our children, what we're sending them back to. We have got 70% of teachers in California who would like to do something else, even though they love teaching, but they're thinking of leaving the profession. We have public education system, K through 12, that's underfunded by $150 billion. Got to talk about that, everybody. Got to talk about that on the Santita Jackson Show. And then the life expectancy for Americans has gone down, not just because of COVID, though. COVID, remember, Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams reminds us, COVID is a snitch. COVID has exposed the inequities in our system, the holes in our system, if you will. And we're going to talk about this multi-system failure that we need to be on the lookout for, particularly with our children. Dr. Shanina Knighton, was quite transparent in telling us what her great nephew is going for his life right now. He's doing well, but they had to put him to sleep, not in a coma, but put him to sleep. And we're going to walk through that because this is something that we think that you need to look out for. And so, let's get right to it, everybody. We got a lot to talk about today. And then, of course, do you have a right to literacy? Do you have a right to read? 7 brave Detroit public school system students sued the system. They sued the public school system. They said, you're not teaching me, and I have a right to learn how to read. Now, the constitutional right, and we're going to be talking about that on the Santita Jackson Show as we do legal Q&A with CK. I mean, can you sue a system for not teaching you, for not providing you with the tools that you need in order to function in the society? And you do know that you do need to know how to read, everybody. You need to know how to read. You need to know how to read. This is weird, but this right to literacy. These lawsuits are taking place all over the country. That's right. These are questions that are being raised by students and their families all over the United States. So let's talk about that today. And everybody, please like and share the show. Like and share the show on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and on the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and we're streaming on WCPT820.com, and of course, the voice of progressive Minnesota, AM 950 Radio. We're streaming there on AM950radio.com. So please, everybody, like and share the show and continue to tell people about us. Hey, Samantha. Hey, Jan. Hey, Barbara Bacon. Hey, Joyce Anderson, sending all my love to my morning stars. All right, everybody. And Francis, what's going on, everybody? Please like and share the show. Everybody, like and share the show. All my morning stars, please like and share the show. And those of you who are listening, please tell people about us. I bump into a lot of people who say, I listen to the show every day, and they tell me about the folks who are on the show. And so it's really gratifying, because what we try to do is have an open conversation here and give you great information so that you can make up your minds for yourselves, everybody. Dedicating the show today to Mikhail Gorbachev, who presided over the end of the Cold War, everybody. Indeed, he helped President Reagan to bring the temperature down. Remember when they were the evil empire? Well, by the end of the 80s, they were not. And so I thank God for his life. And of course, you remember his beautiful wife, Raisa. They did so much to really help to change the world, to change the possibilities. The former Soviet president, who gradually reopened his country, paved the way to the end of the World War, made his transition yesterday at the age of 91. He said, we can only solve our problems by cooperating with other countries, and therefore we need to put an end to the Iron Curtain. God bless him and his family. Everybody, blockbuster DOJ court filing reveals new tales of the Mar-a-Lago search. Indeed, they showed us pictures, everybody. As they say, they brought receipts. What do you think about that? Has that changed your mind at all? Do you still understand what's going on here? It seems like there's a lot more that we do not know. In a new filing, the Justice Department says Trump's team is likely to try to obstruct a probe into the former president's removal of classified documents from the White House. The U.S. Department of Justice yesterday released a photo of classified documents it retrieved from the former president's Florida home earlier this month. The latest disclosure in its investigation into the former president's removal of secret government records from the White House following his 2020 election loss. I wonder what all of this is. In the meantime, do you remember the Monkees? Mickey Dolenz, who was their front man. Everybody loved Davy Jones. I loved Mickey Dolenz. Don't ask me why. But guess what? He has filed a lawsuit against the FBI. They were famously anti-Vietnam War. And the FBI has been issued a lawsuit by the only surviving member of the Monkees. He's the only one who has survived, everybody, for any records that may involve him, his deceased bandmates, or the band itself. The Monkees were investigated by the FBI, like the Dr. King, twice. Once for alleged anti-Vietnam War activities in 1967. Many people feel that is what got their show put off of television, their stance on the war, just like the Smothers Brothers. And another for any information that has been completely redacted. Wow. So what do you think about that, everybody? I mean, you see how you have the right wing pushing against the FBI now, but it was the left wing before. Maybe we need to look at the FBI, everybody. Still in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm going to get someone to talk to us about that, because this water issue that they've got is you can't drink the water. You have sewage coming back in the water, everybody. It's a water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi, according to this CNN report. They did a really lengthy reportage on it last night, and it was really, really very, very helpful, very informative. It has left residents with no running water, hospitals without air conditioning, and it has moved schools online, everybody. Last week, the flooding of the Pearl River after heavy rains impacted the treatment processes at the city's main water facility. Now there's not enough water pressure to serve 180,000 people, Pastor Johnson. As crews work to get the water treatment plant back online, members of the National Guard are distributing bottled water, but that's not enough. In the meantime, we get this news. U.S. life expectancy is down for the second straight year, fueled by COVID. Fueled by COVID or revealed by COVID? Yes, COVID has done some of it, but the fact is, COVID is a snitch. COVID has shown us what the holes in the system are. And when you have this many people who are struggling to eat, who are struggling to get medical care. My mother had to go to the emergency room. I will say this a couple of days ago. Do you know, Pastor Vicki Johnson, that she was there for 7 hours? 7 hours. Mm-hmm. 7 hours. And fortunately, my brother, who's an attorney, went over there. I mean, she went to see my father, who's in rehab, working with his Parkinson's. They took her blood pressure. They said, oh, no. You got to go over there right now. And she'd been waiting for 7 hours. And she kept getting bumped to the back of the line. 7 hours. 7 hours. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 85 degrees. She's doing well, though, everybody, just so that you know. 85 degrees and sunny in Chicago, 87 degrees and sunny in Minneapolis, St. Paul. The Dow closed down 308 points. Wow, what a day. NASDAQ closed down 134 points. The S&P 500 closed down 71 points. In Major League Baseball, the Royals 9, the White Sox 7, the Blue Jays 5, the Cubs 3, and the Twins, thank you, heavens, 10. And the Red Sox 5. That's right. Just give me some good news. I need something, everybody. I need something. Of course, we are looking out in the WNBA, pulling for the Chicago Sky. What is going to happen? They're going to be playing the Sun today. They are behind 0-1 in that series. So let's pull for the Chicago Sky. Pastor Vicki Johnson, how you doing today?
I am doing well, and I thank God that Mrs. J is doing better.
No, thank you. I mean, it's just 7 hours. Seven hours. Yeah. It's just and I said, wow, that's awful. It's awful. And thank goodness she has infrastructure. And just this is what people are going through all over the country and all over the world. But we're a country of 330 million people. I was telling her this yesterday when I was with her. And I said, Mom, how many hospital beds do you think we have? You know, my mother doesn't have tolerance for games. And so I said, Mom, just come on, just give me a guess. And she looked at me. I said, okay, let me end this game because I don't want to get in bad with my mom. You know that. And I said, Mom, there are 1 million hospital beds for 330 million people. And she looked at me. She said, are you serious? I said, oh, yeah. 330 million people have 1 million beds. Now, you could postulate that, okay, what we're trying to do is not keep people sick. Well, you're already not doing that. People equal access to equal high quality health care. So that's not happening. So the thing is, I'm just trying to figure out how. My mother said, do you know how the world would view America if we stopped dropping bombs? And I said, Mom, and started dropping balm, health and healing. What if this became the place in the world that you could come to get well? What? So there is that. So everybody, please take care of yourselves. But that having been said, I'm so glad to have you, Pastor Vicki Johnson. Of course, you are the pastor of the St. Thomas Lutheran Church at 80th and Jeffrey here in Chicago on the South Side. We're so glad that you are having in-person and virtual services. What time is your hour of power? And if people don't want to wear masks, what's the policy?
The hour of power is at 11:45 a.m., 1 hour of worship. And of course, we're asking that people be masked. But if you choose not to, then if you would sit off to yourself so as not to endanger yourself by those that are around you, then we will still welcome you into the sanctuary.
Wonderful, 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 wonderful. That's wonderful news because a lot of people are not masking for a plethora of reasons. That having been said, please, everybody, take care of yourselves because we still are in the midst of a pandemic. They didn't suspend that. They just changed the rules on us. And there it is. So, everybody, we've got some good news from Pastor Vicki Johnson. I want the good news. What is it?
Well, good morning, Santita, and good morning to all of your morning stars and friends. There is good news. One of the biggest family groups of the 1970s was Sly and the Family Stone.
Yes.
Remember them?
Yes.
Just before their performance at Woodstock, they released a hit that was second only to the Temptations' I Can't Get Next to You. It was an easy, breezy, feel-good song written by Sylvester Stewart entitled Hot Fun in the Summertime, whose the lyrics went like this. End of the spring and here she comes back. Hi, 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 hi there. Them summer days, those summer days. That's when I had most of my fun back. Hi, 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 hi there. Them summer days, those summer days. I cloud 9 when I want to, out of school, yeah. County fair in the country sun, and everything is true. Oh, yeah, hot fun in the summertime. And then he said, first of the fall, and then she goes back. Bye, 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 bye there. Them summer days, those summer days. Boom, 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 when I want to, out of school. County fair in the country sun, and everything is cool. Oh, yeah. Hot fun in the summertime. I heard people talking at the beginning of August about summer almost being over and becoming sad. Technically speaking, summer begins in June and ends at the end of September. And if you love it so much, why would you begin being sad so soon when you still have time left to enjoy the summer? Sly Stone only sang about the joys of summer welcoming its coming in the spring and bidding it farewell in the fall with no sadness, because he knew it would come again. Psalm 118 and 24 says, "This is the day which the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." So stop complaining. Plan now to enjoy every bit of summer that we have left and apply the principle to your life across the board. Don't become sad and melancholy about what will be, but enjoy the here and the now. Rejoice and be glad in it. If you will do this, and I believe that you will, then to me, that's good news.
Amen to that. It's still summer. Let me get myself together. How about that? Yeah. I mean, because it is still summer. It is. It's still summer.
Yes, it is.
It's still summer. So let's rejoice in this day and be glad in it.
Right.
Let's, one day at a time, sweet Jesus. Thank you so much. 80th and Jeffrey, 11:45 on Sunday. Get on over there, everybody, to the St. Thomas Lutheran Church. You're going to get a powerful message, an hour of power. You don't want to miss it. Sending you much love. Love you, Patty.
Love you, Santita.
All right. Everybody, we've got Dr. Shanina Knight in here, Pastor Vicki, because you know what? Before we get into, we're praying for her, Pastor Vicki. Her great nephew, you heard, has been struggling with his health. How, first of all, before I ask you about the falling life expectancy in the United States, because I just want a quick snapshot of that, because she's going to take us through how she spotted what happened with her nephew and how we can spot this in our own lives, I guess, with the children and with adults. How is your great nephew doing?
Good morning, Santita. So I was going to say everything is touch and go right now. So they finally extubated him. So what that means is they took the breathing tube out yesterday to trial him on breathing on his own, which he has been doing okay. However, the heart inflammation and issues, which can cause something, it can almost be like heart failure. So ejection fraction is a measurement that is a good indication of heart failure. And what ejection fraction does is it tells us how well our body, like the heart, is pumping blood, okay? So with his being at a level of a 45%, he's not in heart failure. He's not at a normal heart either. And so they're evaluating that right now. So there is a possibility that as a result of this happening, which is this multi-system inflammatory syndrome that can happen in both adults and children, he may have issues with his heart for the rest of his life. And I bring that up to say that when you bring up the topic of life expectancy, Santita, and it being related to COVID, there have been instances of where adults and children may have a fever, may have a tummy ache, may not be feeling overall well, and having that feeling of COVID almost taking them out, but saying, but I tested negative for COVID. You can test negative for COVID, but the body does not lie when you are not feeling well. And oftentimes we have started to use that test as our litmus paper as to if we should go and see about ourselves. And we have to do a reset on that and make sure that we're checking on ourselves on a regular basis. Reason being, as we understand the long effects of COVID, just as we know that we are starting to experience long-term effects of other conditions, even when people had H1N1, right? When there was Zika virus, there's other things that were out there that people are still having impact from or effects from. In this particular instance, you can not have COVID or not be symptomatic as a result of COVID. And because you're not symptomatic and you test negative, your body can then go into this system of inflammation after you have tested negative. And that is what happened. So to have someone show up with symptoms of a fever, to have someone show up with symptoms of a fever, to have someone, have a stomach ache, you're saying, okay, well, maybe the doctors did overlook him in outpatient. They gave him an antibiotic and said this could possibly be an ear infection. It's not strep, but this can possibly be an ear infection, and they sent him home. I was told that if I did not bring him in on that Thursday, he wouldn't still be with us right now. So while somebody can look at the heart failure and think that that's something that's bad, it's actually not as bad as us having to think about, it's not us having to think about actual death. So we don't have to think about death as a result of this happening.
When we get on the other side of the break, I want you to take us through what you saw, because this can happen to children.
Okay.
It can happen to adults. And I think that there are things that we're missing. And, we have a culture in which we feel falsely that you make it on your own, the rugged individualists. So we're supposed to, particularly those of us who are descended from we're African ancestor people who had to work. They literally worked enslaved people to death as they excavate the bones of the remains of those who were enslaved. And there is physical evidence that enslaved people, many were worked so hard that the tendons popped off of their bones. They just literally were worked to death. And that culture is still with us, Dr. Knighton, where you're supposed to work. And quite frankly, that's in all of America. Even if you have the sniffles, you're not feeling great. And particularly now, it's like, well, now you got to keep that job. And so people keep on going, even when they shouldn't be going. People keep on going when they're not feeling well, when they are unwell. And we have to think about that. We do not have a hospital system that can truly accommodate those people who are not well. We don't. We have 1 million beds for 330 million people. That, to me, when you and Dr. Verholden brought that to the show last year, I said, that's crazy. 330 million people, 1 million beds. Well, we're trying to make sure that we get well enough. No, we're not, because we don't even have a universal single payer system that covers everybody. We don't have that. We're busy trying to figure out how to keep people out of nursing school, how to keep people out of medical school, how to keep people out of that profession. We make it harder. We have affirmative action. Why do you need that? Are you kidding me? You need to get as many people as you can into the system who have the aptitude for it, and who more than that have the desire to do it. So we're going to talk about that, because thank God for you. And, I thank God that I was raised around, like, my doctor lives across the street. I was in a neighborhood full of doctors. So I never had to worry. But that is not the reality for most people. In Cuba, they have a doctor per block. That's what they do. They heal people. So when people are looking for medical answers all over the world, they go to Cuba too, believe it or not. What if they came to the United States? What if we were structured that way? Think about it, everybody. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this, because this is happening to a lot of people, and you might not even know it. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Call me at 773-763-9278. Back in just a minute. Santita Jackson Show.
Listen to the Tom Hartman
Pastor
Radio
Vicky, are you still there?
From 11 to 2, right here on WCPT 820.
I don't know
where
if she
facts
left.
matter.
Yeah,
She just
want
left.
her to want you to have a word with
For
her.
years, the special
But how you
interests got
doing?
whatever they wanted in Washington, and Americans paid the price. That all
Dr.
changes
Knighton?
right now, because Congress just passed.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, just checking.
And President
They in
Biden.
school, so I'm
Here's what that means for you. First, Medicare can now finally negotiate
Okay,
lower
hold
prices
on
for
one
prescription
second.
drugs. Drugs
Henry,
like
if you could
insulin
turn
will cost a
down
fraction
the
of what they do
station
today.
just a
The
bit.
days of drug companies
For sure.
pricing seniors
Okay,
are
thank you so
over.
much.
Second, it builds on the Affordable Care Act.
Okay. Yeah, not all the way. I just said because I need to make sure that you are still there. But Thank you. Oh boy, it's a lot.
Is that better?
Yes. Thank you. I just always need to, when I hear you all in the background, I know that you're still there. When I don't hear you.
Yeah, but I mute you.
Oh no worries. I just need to make sure that I still have my people, and I'm still up at the station. So, but how are you? How's the family doing?
So we doing okay. I mean, I think, as I mentioned, it's just out of optimism, understanding, he's still with us.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes, as much as people want to fuss, complain, and say what should have been, what could have happened, and they can harp on the negative, we really do have a lot of stuff to be thankful for. And I think even the message this morning, just about, why are we celebrating, or I was going to say, looking forward to the bad when we still got the good right in front of us.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what was just described, is the fact that summer ain't left yet. So people still complaining, talking about, like the summer almost over, but it's like not making most of the time like right now. And so I have a lot to be grateful for.
Well, amen to that. Amen to that. And you sounding like my dad. He always said, "Oh yeah." He's like,
ready.
"Oh, who do we have?"
What was that? Sorry.
We have Chaparral.
Yes. Do you want me to put it through?
Yes, please. Chaparral Wells, Mrs. Wells.
Yes, ma'am.
How are you?
Good morning.
I'm calling you after the show.
Great. Okay.
Because I forgot. Well, no, I was with my mother yesterday. Into the night.
How's Miss Jackson doing?
Well, she's doing well. Thank God. I feel very blessed. I went from one side of the hospital to the next. My father was
just we have about a minute.
Okay, thank you. He was in therapy, and she is, praise the Lord, doing. She's doing well. Ready to go home. I was like, not so fast, Mama San. Let's go and work this piece out. I said, okay, so I can get cursed out like real good right now.
Well, if she's cursing, she's doing good.
You know that. That's what my father said. He's like, oh, there's my baby. Well, ain't that nothing? Oh, she's raising. Okay. Your mother's raising hell. She's doing well. I'm like, oh, really? You're rhyming on that? Yes. Thank you. He's like, oh, yeah. He said, I married her. So he said, I know when she's raising hell, all is well. Oh my gosh. Oh boy. They are a caution. But we have to look at marriage, and marriages of long-standing. My parents have been together 61 years. 61.
Amazing.
And calls her phone when she was out of the room. Boy, oh boy, he had a fit.
Change the world,
keep him from having a problem.
We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson
Joyce.
Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. We're talking about our health, children's health, and our health overall. I woke up to the disturbing news that American life expectancy has dropped for the second straight year. And there are reasons for that. We need to be talking about that, but we're zeroing in on a family story that Dr. Shanina Knighton is sharing with us, and we thank God for her transparency today, but she's really trying to help us so that we can pay attention to a little known issue that can take you out of here. And had it not, and you have to become your own advocate. COVID should have shown us that. You need to study yourself. I'm not saying you need to reach your own conclusions. You're not a physician, but you certainly need to have enough information to ask your physician the right questions. And if they don't, they need to go get the answers. And if they push back on you, you need to find another doctor now, because it's the practice of medicine, not the perfection of it. They're practicing. They're trying to figure things out all the time. Before we go back to you, Dr. Shanina Knighton, we've got Chapeau Wells, celebrations by us. What are some of the things, I'm getting right to it, what are some of the things I can order for the Labor Day weekend? Yes.
Well, today is the last day, Santita, to place your order for Labor Day. So this weekend we have orders for jerk chicken, grilled chicken, as well as also burgers, hot dogs, ribs, as well as also our spaghetti, potato salad, pasta salad, Cajun pasta, and our mac and cheese. So don't hesitate to give us a call, 708-526-4546, 708-526-4546. I'll be taking orders all day up until 5 p.m. So if you should need anything for your Labor Day weekend, don't hesitate to give us a call. And we are a full service provider, so we can definitely do all of your decoration and decor as well. We do custom balloon arches as well as also vinyl banners and all of our sweet tables as well. So don't hesitate to call us at 708-526-4546. We look forward to serving you. Thank you so much, Santita.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. I'll be calling right after the show. I'm not laughing. I'm very serious. All right, everybody. Let's talk with Dr. Shanina Knighton about our health. What is this that is afflicting your nephew? And does it target children, or can it happen to anyone?
It can happen to anyone, and the condition that Santita is referencing is multi-system inflammatory syndrome. And so it can happen in children, it can happen in adults. And while it can be what they classify to be uncommon, it is very serious. And the thing is you don't know. They're unsure of why certain people are impacted versus others. But it's when your heart, lungs, kidney, brain, your GI organs are like your intestines, your eyes, your skin, all of that becomes inflamed. And it's a serious condition that lasts, that honestly, it can occur weeks after a COVID infection. So it does not necessarily have to happen because you are symptomatic from COVID. It can show up way after you done had COVID.
Is it COVID related or not?
They are finding that it is COVID related. So if they actually do a test, and look for the antigen in your body to see if you've had an infection in the past, when they look for that, then that'll help them to indicate if the pathway of what is happening with your body does follow that pathway. The problem is, just like I was mentioning before, is that it can show, like, for example, it showed up as some lymph nodes being swollen, a kid not feeling good, and you saying, oh, is this an ear infection? Is it a strep throat? Like, what is it? Then when his eyes started to get red days later, I'm like, oh, well, maybe the ear infection backed up into his eyes. But he kept having stomach pain, not wanting to eat. And as things started to get worse and not better, because I think I told you, but urgent care just put him on amoxicillin and said it might be an ear infection. So we just gonna go ahead and just prescribe him medicine. Now, as we all know, with antibiotics, we are in a phase right now of where there is what's called antibiotic-resistant organisms. So organisms that do not respond well to antibiotics. We've gotten to this problem because of an overuse of antibiotics. So the careless prescribing of this medicine when there was no diagnosed test is what not necessarily led to the issue, but it contributed to the issue because a lot of parents could have went home and been like, oh, they gave my baby the medicine and maybe the medicine just ain't working that well, but it will over time. And they could have waited it out for 10 days and called and got an answer. Whereas I said, no, he should be feeling better by now. Like I said, things should be looking different. I should be able to break his fever by now, but I'm not. To take him in. And the medical team said, had I not brought him in, had he not been in the hospital when he did, he wouldn't be with us. And I'm saying that to say, as I think about our audience, when they have that fever that they continuously are taking Tylenol for. On the back of the bottle, it says if your fever has not resolved in 72 hours, you need to immediately seek the care of a physician. Many people don't follow that rule, but there is a reason to that. If your fever cannot be broken by over-the-counter meds, there's something more serious going on that you need to get checked out, and you have to allow yourself that grace.
Well, hold on
And
one
it
second.
means that, yes,
How long does it take? Is it hours? Is it a day? I mean, when should we be looking for some kind of relief or a break in a fever or some relief in
that's
terms
what
of
I just
being
mentioned.
physically
So
unwell?
within 72 hours, so on the back of a pain medicine bottle, Tylenol, ibuprofen,
Mm-hmm.
it says that if it is like you shouldn't, it gives a certain time frame of when you should stop using that product. And a lot of them is within 48 to 72 hours. It'll tell you if your fever has not been resolved or your pain has not been resolved within this period of time, then you need to seek the care of a medical provider. It shares that on the bottle. But I'm expressing that to people because not a lot of people may read that or understand how important just that information is just in itself. So for me, when that third day came, I didn't give him ibuprofen. I didn't give it to him because I said, you know what? I said, something's not right.
Okay, I know I'm like parsing, but I want to know just for all of us. When you say the third day, say this, you find this at the beginning of Monday. Monday to Tuesday morning is 24 hours. Tuesday to Wednesday morning would be 48 hours. Tuesday to Thursday morning would be 72 hours, yes?
Exactly. So if Thursday morning you're not feeling good and you still got a fever, then at that point I wouldn't take the medicine. I would just go in and go see a medical provider.
Now, would you go to
Because
urgent
the
care
thing
or the
is,
emergency room?
so I'm not going to give medical advice because it's dependent upon what your condition is looking like.
Okay.
But I would be seeking out some sort of medical service. And I would be getting seen by someone. If you go to urgent care will tell you, they'll refer you to the proper amount of care that you need. So at that time, we went to urgent care. Urgent care could not see us right away, which then turned into an emergency visit. The emergency room did not have the level of care that was needed, and they had to transfer us down to a larger hospital that could give him specialized care because they recognized that they could not do it. So he was on some sort of care trajectory from Thursday morning, even though everything had been discovered Tuesday. So I'm bringing that up that we know when someone's not getting better and when things don't look right or they don't feel right. And sometimes a test can't tell you what your intuition can. And it's best to be safe than sorry. The problem is we can let bills, we can let jobs, we can let stuff get in the way of our own health. But if we're not here, that employer is going to move on and hire somebody else. But if you got people that's dependent on you, you have to make that sacrifice to see about yourself. So when we're hearing about people that might have, Santita, some sort of like chest pain or they got something going on, typically it's because, and let's say you say, oh my gosh, my cousin died and he was only 45 years old.
Yeah.
When we looking at those numbers, it's not because that person just didn't have no symptoms and dropped dead. It's just that they might have minimized or ignored or not paid attention to or tried to diagnose themselves without the help of laboratory tests, without the test of getting a provider. And in this particular instance, especially, and I continue to mention this, and I know I've talked about it even during the times when Dr. Deb was on. I said, if you don't have a medical provider or have some sort of medical advisor, somebody that you can get expertise from, you need to get one in the era of COVID, because as we're discovering more, understanding more, we're not sure how COVID has impacted our bodies and what will happen over time. And as it is being uncovered, because we ain't even out of it, but it's only been 2 years. So as we continue to discover more, as we continue to do more, it is a good understanding that we really need to wrap our minds around the fact that there's so many unknowns that still exist. And our health outcomes is one of them. So when we talk about life expectancy and the fact that it has been declining and it is COVID related, it's not necessarily just a direct reflect of COVID. It's for people that have, let's say, been working from home and they didn't go in for their breast cancer screenings, their prostate screenings. They're not going in for their annual checkup. They're not going to get their prescriptions refilled because to them they feel okay. It's people that is suffering from depression as a result of COVID and have just given up on their care, period. So when we talk about it being on a decline as a result of COVID, it's just that COVID has caused what we know as to be collateral damage. Because it's just not a direct effect of being infected. It's a direct effect of everything else that is impacted. And that's why the life expectancy continues to decline.
We're talking with Dr. Shanita Knighton about our health, really, and about being vigilant, because I know I keep asking you about hours, and I'm picking, because the fact is we're not Dr. Knighton. We don't know what to look for, and so that is my concern. Did your nephew ever have COVID, to your knowledge?
So that's the thing. To our knowledge, no, right? But his mother did 3 weeks ago, and what they believe is that he might have gave it to her and was asymptomatic. So you know how they say when a kid get a cold, they give an adult pneumonia or the flu?
Yeah.
He literally had no symptoms whatsoever. Could have transferred it to his mother, and then this is the rebound effect of him having it. But if there's no symptoms and there's no suspected cases, you don't know, right? And she had even been testing him during the time that she had it. She kept him isolated and everything. But it's still just no guarantee. And so it's actually the reverse, where they believe he gave it to her. And we're talking about a 2-year-old, okay? That'll be 3 this Friday. But I just want to give the context of people that we're not talking about, let's say, a school-age kid at this point. We're talking about a baby or a toddler.
See, and that's what concerns me about this particular period that we find ourselves in. We're still in a pandemic. The CDC, health professionals agree to that. But all of the protective measures have been relaxed. They've been relaxed. So you have a lot of people who have been vaccinated, who've gotten the shots, and they're walking around and they're asymptomatic. But asymptomatic does not mean that you don't have it, Dr. Knighton. And it doesn't mean that you can't get this. It doesn't mean that down the road you can't get sick. Am I not right?
So it doesn't mean that you can't get sick, and that's exactly that. And it's also the piece of, just as you mentioned, we downplayed asymptomatic. I've heard somebody say, I found out I got COVID, but all I had was an itchy throat, and I thought it was from something else. It's still a symptom. Right?
Yeah.
If you say, my nose is running, it's still a symptom of COVID, but we tend to downplay things because we've illness. We've normalized inflammation.
Okay. We've normalized sickness. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Just like when the fall season come along, Santita, and I know we'll talk about this more, but as the fall season comes along and things start to get cool outside, people say, this is cold season. This is the time where people get sick. We also don't evaluate how we eat. If you got a heck of a lot of sweets, and remember I told you, for every 75 grams of sugar, you lower your immune system. Your immune system is the thing that keeps you from not being sick. But if every 75 milligrams of sugar lowers your immune system for 5 hours.
What 75 milligrams look like? Is that a can of soda?
That is a can of pop and a pastry. That's a cup of coffee and a pastry. A cup of coffee like a macchiato, something with sugar in it, and a pastry. It's not hard to get to 75 milligrams of sugar or 75 grams of sugar. So you can go to the gym, work out, and then say, I deserve a donut. And you just literally lowered your immune system for 5 hours.
After you've worked out.
So imagine us around the holiday season as we enjoying the cranberry sauce and the stuffing. And I know we still gonna do it.
Oh, girl, look, I
But it's
am.
just that people, I know, but it's just the whole fact that when you add up all of that sugar,
Mhm.
and we keep compounding our bodies with sugar day after day after day during the holiday season, and we say, "Oh, I'm not feeling well," it's because the weather didn't change. No, it's because we're putting all of that sugar in our body.
And wait a minute, and it didn't come out. Let's look at that too, because elimination is an issue. I mean, I see all of these commercials trying to help people to become regular, and we're going to have you and Dr. Terry Mason come on, because I remember when they were talking about John Wayne, the iconic John Wayne. When he died of cancer. And the last time he appeared on television, you saw this tall, strapping man who was still tall, but he was so thin. He was so sick. And you were like, oh my gosh, he's really suffering. And it is alleged that he had pounds and pounds of waste in his intestinal tract, in his colon. And that stayed with me because I was a little girl when he passed. But that stayed with me. And I mean, what is the importance of taking food in and getting it out, Dr. Knighton?
So I think it's not necessarily about the taking the food in and getting it out as much as it is our ability to be able to effectively eliminate waste. But we have to understand that even with that, everything that goes in our body is not necessarily wasteful. And it's not also a thing where just because it's going inside of our body doesn't mean it is also helpful, right? So we can put things in our body that can actually literally suck the nutrients. It can suck the nutrients out of our body. And so that's when we were talking about the food additives, the food colorants, the things that we shouldn't be putting in. The fact that there are certain foods that can make you, let's say, constipated or can cause an inflammatory response. And so, and that's without getting into any particular food today, but it's just being aware of that it's not the fact that the seasons changing is what just makes us sick. It's what we're putting in our bodies.
What should an adult look out for with this multi-inflammatory system failure?
Not feeling well.
Just not feeling well.
And when I say not feeling well, it being unresolved. You having a fever, the fever, okay? So inflammation typically is associated with fever because you got like all of those white blood cells that's rushing somewhere, right? So if you're having a fever and that fever is unresolved, if you're just generally not feeling well, if you've gone to the doctor and bacterial infections have come back negative and they're not able to indicate what's wrong with you, but you know that you just do not feel well, when you know that you're a little bit more short of breath than what you normally was, if you're having like let's say a deep cough that's coming from nowhere and you're trying to understand why, somebody might look at that as being a regular cold or saying that I need to get, but go in and give me and I'm saying for me, go in and get a flu test, or they got something called the flu SC2. The flu SC2 can test you for flu and COVID at the same time. Get tested because at least you know where you are. And then how people talk about weeks after they've had COVID having a long-term effect. You want to know where you are with COVID, which is why even to my frustration with testing programs going away is how do we then be able to target some of these cases of MISC if people are not even aware if they even had the infection?
So you should be extra vigilant if you've had COVID.
Extra vigilant if you've had COVID, extra vigilant if you don't even know if you had COVID. Meaning if you know that you're not somebody that tests regularly, but you're starting to have some of these symptoms and not feeling well, it's best to go see about yourself.
So it's just not feeling well.
And it's best to not wait.
So you're just saying it's just not feeling well, not feeling at yourself, just not feeling well is enough.
Just not feeling well is enough. And when I'm saying just not feeling well, it means not feeling well from the standpoint of, just as I mentioned, a fever, that's unresolved, having a cough, redness, feeling swollen, just really not feeling like yourself, but your fever might not necessarily be responding, to medicine after the 2 days or the 2 or 3 days. On that third day, you should be going in and seeking out care. If you know that you have to continuously take a Tylenol or an ibuprofen or a fever-reducing med, if you have to keep taking a fever-reducing medication, and I'm not going to say Tylenol because that's the brand, so I'll say acetaminophen.
Mm-hmm.
If you keep taking acetaminophen or ibuprofen and it's not resolving the fever inside of your body, that is within a couple of days. By that third day, you should be going in and having someone check you out, because you want to say, I've been taking this medicine, my fever is unresolved, and I'm concerned about myself. So to me, that is a cardio symptom.
Mm-hmm. I mean, see, I've got
And
about
if you
90
notice,
seconds.
that's one of the things that they screen for.
Okay. Should you ask to be screened for this specifically?
There is honestly no diagnostic test. They run a whole bunch of tests and come up to that conclusion based off of what your body is doing.
So what should you say when you present yourself to urgent care, to the emergency room, to a doctor, when you're just not feeling well and you suspect this might be it?
May have been. So you can express, let's say, if you know that you've had a case of COVID, if you know that you've had a case of COVID already and you know of that approximate date of having it, but then you come in and you say, but today, I just had COVID within the past month per se, but today I have a fever. I've treated my fever over the course of the last 2 days with this type of medicine, but my fever isn't going away. My lips might be swollen, my eyes might be swollen. You tell them what's swollen and what's not feeling right, and tell them that you need to be tested, further tested. And it's not going in telling them to just check for MISC, but you letting them know, like, my fever is not going away, and this is a problem. Something else is going on with my body. Because that means that there is some sort of indication of inflammation. Like your fever is your warning sign to your body, telling it that it's not functioning right, it's overheating, and that there's inflammation.
Dr. Shanina Knighton, do you have a post on this? I haven't checked in the past couple of days. I've been trying to make sure my parents are all right. Have you posted on this?
I do not at this time. And when I'm saying I do not at this time, just as many know, we trying to get ahead and stay ahead of monkeypox.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I feel like everything's coming at us. But the upside of this is that we can really begin to focus on being as healthful as possible. And that is why we need to fight for a system that will ensure that every human being has equal access to equal high quality health care. You need a universal single payer system. You need a system where anybody can go into any, we should have the greatest hospitals in the world. We should 1 million beds for 330 million people. That's insane. So,
and I agree, but Santita, to tell you this, money's not going to change it. It's not money. It has to be the quality of care, the expectation of care, and there has to be a shared partnership between patients and healthcare providers.
And stop closing schools, Shanina, because by closing these public schools, we have eliminated nurses and people who want to be physicians and people who want to be paraprofessionals in the health field. There are a lot of talented people whose dreams have been deferred or who have been dashed. And we cannot afford to waste any human being. Every human being is a treasure. Look at you. First person in your family to graduate, oh my goodness, from high school. Look at you. You're a blessing. You're a miracle. Love you, girl. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show. Is literacy a right? Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Ooh. Sorry, girl, I ran over time thinking about you, girl. But I'm going to get this young woman who's working with when you have time, I would like to connect this young woman who's working with my father to you. She is a jewel. And for some reason, she reminds me of you. She's Beautiful, number one, just like you are. She's just a beautiful
Oh,
young lady. Oh,
thank you.
oh, it's true. I had to go on my phone. She went on her phone, but you know how you young people are. You mention a name and you all go do 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 do. I was like, oh, honey, this woman, Tremaine Hawkins, converted more men to Christ because she looked like a model. She looked every time the Hawkins family came out, men would be screaming for Tremaine, and I just thought, oh well, she is great, honey. When they talked about the fact that she looked like a Paris fashion model, and she always had. I mean, she was just like ebony hued and perfect. You know, she doesn't have a
That's
pore.
awesome.
I mean, just perfect look. She's perfect. she's perfect. And whenever she would come on that stage or come to the microphone, the men would start coming out of the back. Oh, but see, now I get it. I didn't get it before. But oh my gosh, now I get it. I said, honey, but and she looks like her. You know, you are all from that same kind of beauty. It's just stunning, just perfect, perfect, perfect. Don't need a stitch of makeup here. I'm tattooing my face every morning. Oh, well, you know, I love
about those tools in particular.
Well, because I have to say, this is not about the capabilities of these students. It's about their it's about the opportunity to learn. And see, and that's what concerns me. Look, my father got a D in preaching at the University of Chicago, where he was on full scholarship because they did not appreciate his process. He would do the research, he would do the writing, but then by the time he would have to give the presentation in chapel, he was not going to read a sermon to you. That is not our tradition. He had outlined not only he had researched, he had written, and then he outlined what the speech was. I mean, and this would happen to countless Black seminarians who came out of the Black church tradition. And I'm just looking at these schools. When you look at the underfunding of these inner city schools, Dr. Whitaker, you see it. And these kids are fully capable. They're fully capable. They don't have the opportunity, and that's what this comes down to. But let's stay right there, Dr. Whitaker, because I want to bring in Attorney Jones and Attorney Connolly and Dwight McKee, because this is a real fight. The fact that we don't have an educational amendment, CK, and you worked with Congressman Jackson on that, is just shameful. It's shameful. He constructed that almost a quarter of a century ago. And now look at us. 2/3 of Black kids in California are not at grade level. 61% of Latino kids are not at grade level. Come on. Attorney Jones?
Well, I know Daryl Jones has been on this issue as well.
Oh, absolutely, CK and Santita. Let me tell you, the case that we're talking about that comes out of the Sixth Circuit here, out of the Sixth Circuit in U.S. federal court systems, Gary B. versus Whitmer, which was the governor of Michigan. And, in stating this issue, Santita, you're correct. You're 100% on point, right? It's not about the testing and whether or not the students and the standardized test that's being used. What the circuit court is going at is the access, just the access to the possibility of being able to have a fair education. And what the circuit court is really focused on in Michigan and in their decision is saying that the state of Michigan in this situation was so negligent in the educational opportunity for the students that it then created the potential constitutional issue as to whether or not they are providing the students with the tools to try to succeed, to try to learn, to try to become literate. And it's really interesting in this case because what they're doing is they're really saying that the conditions at the school systems in Detroit, with all the segregation and all the unequal per pupil funding and everything else that was going on, that they didn't have books to learn from. They didn't have teachers in the classrooms. That the teachers that were there, they would have a course in biology, but have a book that's in a different area that applies to the topic. So there wasn't the opportunity for them to become literate in those areas. But when you don't have a teacher that's in the classroom to teach you, that's basic. This isn't about whether or not you can learn. You're not going to learn because there's no one there to teach you. That's what the court was so infuriated by in the U.S. Court of Appeals in dealing with Detroit. This was the problem there. It wasn't one of meeting a standardized test. They didn't have to worry about the standardized test because the students wouldn't be able to read the standardized test because no one taught them anything about reading. That was the attack that the U.S. Circuit Court took on in the Gary B. versus Whitmer case. Now, the interesting question that's going to now result from this will be that if this case is appealed up to the Supreme Court, what will this U.S. Supreme Court say?
That is my question, Daryl. Daryl, that is my question with this court. With these people who receive these elite educations. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, Santita. I said bad, and more bad. I should have been on mute.
No. Look, this is a real conversation. Because, this is a conversation as we're going back to school with 300,000 teachers that are and paraprofessionals who are missing in the system, to at least 2,000 in the state of Illinois. This is a problem because to me, there is just a concerted effort not to educate our children. I mean, just
Well, the exact same analysis that they use in overturning Roe versus Wade, Justice Alito, no matter any of his disclaimers, that is what will be used to say, I believe, that we do not have a constitutional right to literacy.
because guess what? His child is on the court,
it.
Clarence Thomas, the one who sat up under his robe.
Well, there we have it.
Oh, come on.
Well, and I know Aaron, Santita, I know Aaron has very strong views about this as well.
Yeah.
And, when you have children right now, and even if you don't have children right now, it hits home because it doesn't matter what your children are doing. Their peers aren't getting the education, and that impacts the entire system.
Absolutely. And I have a little bit of a personal and professional background that I don't always talk about regarding this issue on this show, but I'd love to dig into it a little bit. And I personally, and my son as well, have learning disabilities ranging from ADHD. I myself am dyslexic and have dyscalculia, which means that I mix up my numbers in a way that is not useful to my brain. It takes me a little bit longer to do things. Unfortunately, I didn't get diagnosed with that until I was graduated from law school.
Unbelievable.
And so one of the things we see in folks, and luckily I did not have the portion that impacted my ability to read. Obviously I was able to graduate college and go to law school, but everything took me longer, right? And I never knew why. Many kids, as many as in some studies, for example, in New York City, the amount of folks incarcerated in New York City who are dyslexic is estimated at 30%. Some Texas studies have it at 50%, even as high in some places as 72%. So if you can't read, you can't do a lot in this world. You can't fill out paperwork. You can't fill out a job application. You lose confidence in so many pieces of your life. So the screening and support that we have for our most vulnerable kids, whether that's learning disabilities, whether that's more severe developmental disabilities, those pieces are really, really important too. And the fact that we don't have national screening to see where kids are, so we know where the spot on the map is and where they need help and where those resources should be targeted, is a big problem. We're seeing some states mandate that. I think it's almost up to 40 now. I believe the last count was 39 that have some sort of screening for these high-risk folks. But these are the people that exactly what you were talking about, CK. And a lot of the work I've done is with folks like hockey player Brent Sopel, who has his own foundation, the Brent Sopel Foundation, that works in the United States and Canada to bridge some of these gaps and give scholarships to teachers. The I Am Able Foundation that looks at the connections between all types of learning disabilities and how students and teachers need support for their mental health as they go through this as well, right? So this is a big conversation, and I want to touch down on something that Santita said. We don't have enough teachers. We don't have enough para-educator support. My mother was a reading specialist, para-educator for 20 years. And the changes I was able to see in her students when I would volunteer in her classroom was amazing. We don't have the funding for that extra help. We have teachers in kindergarten with 35, 36 students and no adult support. If a kid is struggling, or even if a kid is at reading level already, how are we keeping them there and making them go to that next level? So this is a big, big issue, but absolutely, I believe inherent in our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, we have the right to read, the right to literacy, but are we going to fund it is the real question. At the local, at the state, and at the federal level, what are we going to put into place to hold ourselves accountable?
You know what? Well, let's go. Dwight McKee, we've seen this. And, and Dwight has had an experience, quite frankly, that I had never heard of. But you had the Superintendent Willis here, and you didn't go to school for a whole day when you were growing up, yes?
Yeah, we went for 4 hours. We went from 12 to 8 to 12, or we went from 12 to 3. In the Willis wagon, it was split. You only went to school half a day while I was in school. But what I'm finding out is that, no, we don't have a right to education. We have the opportunity to education. What opportunity has more to do with is the brother said, is access to the resources, which allows us to be able to read. I teach in the class on the West Side with Pastor Hatch, and we have the discarded. We have about 100 young men, most of whom have come out, many of whom have come out of jail, who none of them has succeeded in a public school. And what I find out is that the problem is not so much reading as it is comprehension. I don't confuse reading and literacy. What I find out that happens in school is that these teachers teach to the test. They teach these kids in order to pass the test because they get graded on how many kids pass the test. So they don't teach comprehension, and they teach lessons rather than principles. Your dad used to say that a text without a context is a pretext. And what he was talking about is that when you teach these kids memory without teaching them the logic of what they're learning, is that even when they know the words, they don't understand the context. It's almost like Jeopardy history. Who's the first black to make a peanut or to deal with the peanut? Who's the first black to deal with the oxygen test? With no context for why the invention was invented, what the time frame was, the spirit of the guy in the background of the lady that made these inventions. There is just memory rote. There is no ability. They don't teach the kids critical thinking or consequential thinking. And so I would rather see us focus educationally on changing the methodology around how these kids learn. It's amazing when I look at these young men who everybody has written off. And in 3 or 4, we teach every Friday the lessons there. And in 2 or 3 months, they are a whole different creature because they begin to understand precepts. It's one thing to know what a clock is, another thing to know what time is.
There's no question about that.
So that's what I like to do.
Well, I think we have to focus on that, Dwight. But the fact is, in Detroit, there were classrooms where there were no teachers. So we have to be on that track and that track too. We have to look at a young man who was able to get through the Detroit public school system, graduated at the top of his class. Then he finds out when he gets to his school in Florida that he can't read. So it wasn't just teaching to the test. There's a lot going on in this educational system. You have teachers who are not properly trained. It's not that they don't want to teach. They've not been properly trained. But let me tell you where this does not happen. This does not happen in the prep schools. I mean, for those of us who are in Chicago, that's University of Chicago Lab, that's Francis Parker, that's Latin. That's the top tier schools. It doesn't happen there. When you go to Washington, D.C., it does not happen at Sidwell Friends. It does not happen at the National Cathedral School for Boys, which is St. Albans. It does not happen at the National Cathedral School for Girls or St. Andrews or Episcopal. It doesn't happen there. It doesn't happen at Choate. It doesn't happen at Exeter. It doesn't happen at these schools. And it doesn't happen at Whitney Young, and it doesn't happen at Northside Prep, and it doesn't happen at Peyton.
Because there's a different expectation.
Yeah.
They don't expect our kids to be able to read.
And that for me is the problem. That's why we have to deal with that too. We have to deal with that too, CK.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Without a question. It's very, very different. And by the way, it goes up it continues on in college and it continues on in the workplace. The whole notion of standardized testing or standardized testing on any level to determine the competency of someone to be promoted, the competency of someone to go to college, and all of that, that's a whole nother discussion. I've been involved in litigation for 8 years against the state of New York because of the administration of a battery test that the Justice Department said was discriminatory on its face. So this is a complex issue, but right now the focus is on the children. And when it starts with the children and the disparities between public schools, private schools, for some it's this way and for others it's not, it's a very, very significant issue. But my only point is litigation. I hate to say it, but litigation is the way that we're able to gain some rights in the space. Because when we look to the Constitution, we have to distinguish between what we should have, which is the right to literacy, the right to be educated, the right to vote, and what actually we have,
well, hold on,
which we see through litigation, is something different.
Hold on, because I'm up against the clock. CK, can you stay with me just a little? Can you all stay with me a little longer, everybody? If you can. CK, are you going to be on Court TV today?
I'm on Court TV later today.
Okay, very good. And so everybody, if you can just stay with me for a few minutes on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, please, because we finally got back up on StreamYard. We've been having a tough time this week. And just so you can, Attorney Jones, if you can stay with me a minute, Attorney Connolly, Dr. Whitaker, CK Hoffler, please stay right here. But I want to read to you just very quickly from this NBC story that got my attention 3 years ago, how a lawsuit over Detroit public schools could have an earth-shattering impact. These were the closing words of this particular story, and it broke my heart, because it really went to, you have all of these kids who are trying, and they came to the conclusion that the lawyer said the word education is not mentioned in the Constitution. That is what is unsettling to me, CK, because guess what? We're going to look up, and this will go to the Supreme Court. And the word education is out there, and you have someone named Clarence Thomas, you have Kavanaugh, you have Amy Coney Barrett, you have all of these people who would uphold a caste system. They said even the attorney representing the defendants, who include Michigan's governor and members of its elected Board of Education, acknowledged the schools in Detroit were unacceptable. That's 3 years ago. This predates COVID. This ain't got nothing to do with COVID when the suit was filed. However, Raymond Howd, the Michigan Assistant Attorney General representing the state, argued that there's a difference between a serious problem and one that violates students' rights. That's what makes the students' argument such a difficult one to make legally. The Detroit case was already thrown out by a district court judge who found that while the allegations were alarming, they did not mean the Detroit schools were unconstitutional. The plaintiffs appealed the dismissal to the Supreme Court. There's no mention of the word education in the Constitution, and the Supreme Court has held in the past that there is no constitutional right to education or to equally fund schools. So much of this comes out of Brown v. Board of Education. Brown v. Board of Education, we keep making it a racial decision. Oh, no, it was an economic decision. Yes. Do my tax dollars count in the black side of town? And do they have the same weight that they do on the white side of town? Now, do we have a right to literacy or not? I mean, everybody. And we need to get serious about this, because while it's hitting black people and brown people, it's going to hit everybody eventually, because most people in America are disengaged and are underprivileged, if you will. You're not part of the 1%. Okay? So stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and the Santita Jackson and Friends page, because CK, I want you to take it away. And of course, what time will you be on Court TV?
On Court TV from 10 to 12.
Eastern Standard Time. Okay, well, I'm not going to hold you long, but I want you to hold court with this fantastic group, Dr. Whitaker. Take us away. God bless you, everybody. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show.
Thank you.
Okay, but you all continue, because we're still rolling. I mean, education is not mentioned in the Constitution, everybody.
Well, but see, that's what I'm saying about the analysis of the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Women's reproductive rights weren't mentioned in the Constitution either. And so women didn't have the right to vote at that point or do anything. And black people were chattel. So the same analysis that the U.S. Supreme Court used in overturning Roe versus Wade can be used to say that there's no right to literacy. These are crazy. To me, it's as easy as saying, do I have a right to go to the bathroom? I mean, I hate to be this graphic. Well, there's no constitutional right that says I have the right to go to the bathroom, although I do have the right to bear arms, but there's no constitutional right. But should I have to really have litigation to determine whether I have the right to go to the bathroom? I don't mean the right to go to a desegregated. I just mean go to the bathroom. So there's some things that are so basic. To me, literacy is that basic. But if we want to source something in a constitution, in federal law, in state law, and local laws, and ordinances, no, it's not a given, and we have to look at that. Just as slavery's on the ballot, this is something that we believe is disturbing.
Let me read this to you. After 2 years of struggling to pass any of his community college classes, Jamaria Hall, 19, knows this for certain. His high school did not prepare him. The 4 years he spent at Detroit's Osborne High School were, in his words, a big waste of time, recalling 11th and 12th grade English classes where students were taught from materials labeled for third or fourth graders, where long-term substitutes showed movies instead of teaching. Come on, y'all.
Yep. Let me tell you, in Atlanta, it's that. It's worse. I've spoken to students at school where they are 5 editions behind on the books, and the books are not what the books that are used in the classroom are not relevant to any of the topics, by the way. And they're being used, and they're behind on the editions, and that school teachers, and I shared this with you, Santita, are finding materials, Xeroxing materials, passing them out at their own cost to the students, and that's how sometimes students are learning things. That's a travesty. Now, we have some school teachers who are loyal, who love the students, who will do that. But there's some other school teachers who don't have that luxury and just won't do it. And so those kids are being denied the opportunity to learn in an environment where they should be learning, because taxpayer dollars are going to that. So these are complex questions that really should not be complex. We're litigating issues that should not be litigated, that should be a given. But when we do a legal analysis, I think it's important to look at what is, not what should be, but what is, because that informs what's happening.
I mean, Dr. Whitaker, what's the answer? Is it a constitutional amendment?
Well,
education? What is the answer? Or what is an answer?
An answer, right? I like that. An answer is for us to be clear about what bar we're going to use to determine the minimal level of access. Now, I know earlier I was referring to literacy, but I can appreciate the shift to the bigger topic, which is the extent to which students have access. When I must admit, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, when I hear you say things like 5 and 6 editions behind, in my role, in part, I'm responsible for curriculum development and or the recommendation of the adoption of curriculum. And I'll just take a moment to say that I have personally yet to be in a system where we were more than an edition or 2 behind. And so I think that would be a concrete example from a practical perspective. I know you've got it from a legal perspective on what is unacceptable when we are, and yet even though, for example, textbook editions curriculums are outdated, what we have to continue to remind ourselves is the standards are actually changing. The standards are actually still there. And so that's actually why I push back on report cards. For example, across our country, let's think about a school district that are 2 and 3 decades, sometimes maybe even relevant to the access that they provide students to content via their curriculum that's relevant and in alignment with state and federal level expectations for their performance. And they don't get it, right? But then at the state and federal level, and sometimes state, we are issued a report card. How can you issue a report? How can you issue a grade to a community? Forget the district. I'm talking about the spirits and the lives of the people that we're actually talking about here. How can we issue a grade of F to a community that resides in a school district when we know these variables negatively impact students' access to a quality education? If I could have one thing happen before I left the face of this earth, and I'm in good shape, hopefully that's no time soon,
yes,
it would be that they would do away with grading schools. You can't grade schools. when you know that those factors are not being addressed?
I mean, Daryl, I just don't know what to say. I mean, if this goes to the Supreme Court, what could we expect with all of these originalists? At least 5 of them are originalists. They've packed the court.
And that's, you're absolutely right, Santita, and that's the scary part, because we know that in this Gary B case that's coming out of Detroit, the whole question is one, they're framing it under the 14th Amendment, which simply is saying that if the government's going to provide access to education for students, then it's got to provide equal access for everyone. And what's happening right now in Detroit is the challenge really is to the access, the opportunity to get to that equal access. And they're saying that the city of Detroit is not providing the vehicle to provide the students that access. And so the question to the Supreme Court, as it's going up, will be, is the government required to provide the vehicle to the access to literacy for all the students, not equally, but just access? And with the current makeup we now have of this Supreme Court, and we know that this Supreme Court, certainly has been hostile to educational equality issues. I don't see where we find the 5 votes to be able to say that there is a requirement that vehicle equal access be provided, and that this and what Detroit has done is violative of the 14th Amendment, because in essence, they haven't provided these kids the opportunity to have that access. When you have a chemistry book in a biology class, it's not going to do you any good. And if you don't have a teacher to be able to explain things to you, it does you no good. So, and all of the volume of problems that they have, and just providing the basics in terms of giving the kid the opportunity to be literate, to say that it's not there. That's going to be what's presented to the Supreme Court. Does a government entity have a requirement to be able to say that they must provide access, at least basic access to literacy? And the city of Detroit did not do this for those students. And I'm not confident that they're going to say that the government has that requirement. I'm just not confident that they're going to do it.
Well, maybe, Dwight, this will put us...
Let me tell you what we do have the right to do. We do have the right to teach our own children. We do have the right to set our churches up on Saturdays as ancillary academic institutions. We do have the right to do what we did in the South coming out of slavery, is to set our own institutions up and assume the responsibility, the community responsibility to teach our children. I think if we're just going to depend upon the public schools to teach our children, they'll never be taught, because it's not in their interest to teach our kids. For them, it's for many of them, especially the little white teachers, for many of them, not all, it's just a job or a way to get their tuitions paid. And so we do have the right to assume that the Supreme Court is going to vote against education being a right as opposed to an opportunity, and to then set our own institutions, ancillary institutions up, like the Jewish community does, and supplement education and teach our own.
I mean, and that's what I grew up with in breadbasket and push as a child. Our education was supplemented. And when we went on strike, which they did routinely, Dr. Whitaker in Chicago, we didn't miss a beat. Because because they gathered the teachers who were not on the picket lines, a form of protest, and you remember this, Dwight, was for them to come to Push and to these other places that the breadbasket and Push had commandeered so that our kids could go to school. Miss a beat. So we're going to have to, I think we have to go, you're right, another step. And that was my point. That was the question that I was about to ask, Dwight. What next? Because we're not helpless here. And I'm not saying that you should not demand that we get out of the public till what we have put in. Oh, no, we have to fight for that. But in the meantime, we have to redouble our efforts, Dr. Whitaker, to educate our children ourselves. I mean, you have to, our Jewish brothers and sisters teach their children their history. They're not going to let the people who oppressed them teach their children. Carter G. Woodson told us not to do that. He said, you don't hand your child over to the oppressor. Are you crazy? No, you get this from them and you keep on moving. But Dr. Whitaker, we have to have a plan to deal with this. I'm sorry?
Seems like we can also run for some of those school board positions, the elected school board positions, so we have access and our voice is at the table when things are being determined. That's got to be a part of the plan.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we have to have an education plan.
I think a part of that plan has to consist of advocacy. I've been a teacher, and so I recognize how difficult sometimes it is to go out and advocate, but, we have to do something different. We know that Albert Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So in terms of, it breaks my heart to hear teachers talk about not only their students not having access, but them not having, educators not having access to the materials that they need in order to deliver high quality instruction. And so unfortunately, they're going to have to come out of the classroom from time to time and interact with the policymakers. I mean, I have to ask, how often are we as educators sitting with those that inform policy on our behalf before we cast a vote? Do our elected officials leave meetings with us with a blueprint for what, not just it is stating at the federal and government level that our students need, but for what the communities, their constituents, the communities that they serve? In my humble estimation, every politician should be able to sit at the table, locally, state level, or the federal level, and say, these are not just the issues that are on the board here in D.C., but these are the issues that, in education in particular, because that always is like the last topic of discussion. These are the issues that my constituents say matter to them, relevant to their ability to gain access. And to be able to articulate that on behalf of the constituents is key. And that only happens when community members, parents included, and teachers, all the way down at the teacher level, began to advocate. So that requires, in many cases, a paradigm shift in thinking about the role of the educator. It has to shift.
Well, and the educator has to they have to see themselves differently. They have to see themselves as activists. That's how we got to know.
That's exactly what I'm referring to.
I mean, no, I'm with you. I'm with you on it. I mean, I think as you walk into the community hall, you see Miss Oralee Sanders, who was a brilliant educator and an activist. I mean, that's all PUSH was. It was, and it has to become again a clearinghouse for activists. You can be a member of any organization or church you want. We do activism. Take all that and bring it right here. And we've got to do that. We've got to do that. This is a woman who produced the man who helped to co-create Opera Ebony, which is in New York, which is the musical correlative to Alvin Ailey and Dance Theater of Harlem. They were created around the same time. I mean, and one of her sons is one of the great artists of the world representing Haitian art. I mean, she's just brilliant, and she just kept producing brilliant people who were teaching and who teach. We've got to have a plan, because these folks have a plan. They already said that education is not in the Constitution. Voting is not in the Constitution, and they are right. And you've got a court full of originalists. I'm like, what are they going to reinstitute slavery? Goodness gracious. The good news is, hey, they could. It's not a joke. It's on the ballot in 5 states.
And all they're going to do is,
as long as it's on the ballot,
all they're going to do is teach us enough to go and work for them.
How about that?
Because that's what education is set up to do. It's set up to maintain the caste systems, maintain the status quo. They're going to teach us just enough for us to be able to count money at Walmart, or to count money at Target.
And women, and they were moving that job.
Enough to be able to work for them.
And they were moving that job while Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are talking about how the earth is going to be barren. Jeff Bezos a few months ago said that visiting planet Earth will be like visiting Yellowstone Park. I said, that's interesting. Elon Musk just said the same thing a few days ago. These folks are already counting on you not being here. Now, come on. Wake up, everybody. Oh, remember that song by Teddy Pendergrass? And Melvin, what's his name? Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Wake up, everybody. You got to wake up. Wake up. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Do you want your children educated or not? Do you want to be educated or not? There are a lot of illiterate, functionally illiterate adults, and you ought to be able to walk into a center in the United States, Dr. Whitaker and Attorney Hoffler. I'm going to let you go because I know you got to get on television. And Attorney Jones and Dwight. I remember Percy Sutton had planned to do that in New York. Set up a 24-hour clinic where you could just walk in and sit at a computer, even if you were computer illiterate, and learn how to read. Those are where our resources need to be going. Reverend Jackson says when you are behind, you have to run farther, faster, higher. Don't complain. Tears and sweat are made of the same substance. Stop crying and get to work. I don't know. I do know. That's why I brought it up today. Because I think we have some work to do, CK. We really do. I know you got to run and do your court TV, but I mean, your thoughts.
I do have to run. But I just wanted to say, first of all, this is an incredible discussion, as always, Santita. Thank you for this. My thoughts are we have to keep our eye on the prize. There's so many colossal crises going on right now. Jackson, Mississippi, people really not having access to water. Our children not having access to literacy and books. And there is a huge digital divide, and there's huge disparity in our community. This disparity has existed forever. So I'm with Dwight McKee when he says we can't just alone count on public schools to educate our children. We have to reinforce faith-based institutions and other institutions that step in the cut and train and educate our children. Because children who are not well educated go on to be adults who can't be productive, even though they want to be productive, because they don't have the fundamentals. We have to stop that cycle. And the only way to do it is to start at its core with education with the children, no matter what schools they're in, no matter where they are in the country. So this is an issue, but do not count on the U.S. Supreme Court to be a savior for anything right about now, especially not when it relates to individual rights and things that aren't specifically enumerated in the U.S. Constitution. And again, I want to remind us what we already know, which is when the Constitution was framed, Black people were not considered human beings. So,
well, maybe this is a good thing, CK. Because it's going to wake us up and move us in the direction in which we need to go. I mean, because Dr. Whitaker and CK, you're the chair of Push. Push on Saturday, kids ought to be able to come by on Saturday and find one of these retired teachers or a teacher who's willing to come in and volunteer on a Saturday and get some help, some academic help or assessment.
Academic, yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, Push has always done those types of things in the community and always been a place where people could rely on. But we're in a situation now we have to go back to basics, like real basic. Because
Absolutely.
Our country has deviated from the basics.
And we're falling further and further behind. We are. CK,
well, Santita,
you go.
Everyone, much love. Thank you all. And I will talk to y'all soon.
That's right. Have a great time on Court TV. Everybody, CK is going to be on from 10 to 12, which is 9 to 11 our time. Catch her on Court TV and let the people at Court TV know how much you love her and you want to see more of her. She needs a show on Court TV. How about that?
Certainly hit the nail right on the head when she said that we can't rely on the Supreme Court to protect our rights and to educate and require the education of our children. And I think that 100% right that we've got to do it ourselves. We've got to be certain that we've put in place the foundational information so that our kids have the access to learn, and that we're teaching our kids our history and teaching them to read, to write, and all the basics. But I think that in addition to that, because it's a comprehensive approach, and I think that in that comprehensive approach, we've also got to be certain that we're on school boards, we're running for any school board position, so that we can monitor and have the opportunity to have a say with regards to how funds are spent and what curriculum is held, is being taught in our schools. I think all of that is part of a comprehensive approach that we must take. And the one thing that I really find distressing when we're talking about the Detroit school system is that, when we say that the kids are functionally illiterate, we're also saying that they're to the point that they would not be able to exercise their right to vote, meaning that they couldn't fill out the application and the requirement for the registration to be able to vote, can't read the question that's being presented when they go into the booth on various issues that are presented for the community. So, all of that becomes really detrimental, and it's a very, very serious issue that we've got to really address. I mean, that's my view of it, Santita.
Well, I mean, it impacts every part of your life. Before we get closing thoughts from Dr. Whitaker, Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Well, with the sanitizing of the curricula and with the mythologizing of history, we really don't want these people to teach our children because they're not teaching truth. They're teaching lies and aggressive lies. They've told you they don't want anything that violates their comfortability. They don't want taught. And most of history in this country is going to violate their comfortability, because most of history in this country is the reality of them lying, stealing, cheating, taking people's land and killing people and enslaving other people. And they don't want that said. So the only thing left for them to teach is mythology and lies. And so we really, in my estimation, have to be very, very, very careful with us giving them the freedom to impose those lies on our children. I think we have to teach our own children, teach them the truth, so the truth can ultimately set them free.
Amen to that. But Carter G. Woodson said it in his book. He said, you do not give your child over to their oppressor to let them get taught by your oppressor. Their oppressors. Don't do it. That's crazy. We have to change our thinking, and you have to do for self, everybody. Dr. Whitaker. One of the paths forward, just help us, because, we're going to continue. This is going to be a rolling discussion, because I think, I'm hoping, and I'd love to talk with you about it, finding so many of these teachers, because they are ministerial in their zeal. And you teach not for the money, it's because you just have a passion to teach. When you see that light go on in a child's eyes, when they believe in themselves, when they get a concept, it is the most glorious feeling in the world. But, when you've done a little something, when God has been able to use you in a way that's helped to change someone's life for the better, and they come to you years later and say, I just saw Halle Berry on HGTV. She gave her teacher a makeover on the first floor of her home. And she said, you just don't know what you did for me, but you did it for everybody. You changed my life. You changed my life. I was wandering. I was lost. I was wandering, and you changed my life. You changed my life. You changed my life, and you reshaped me, and I wouldn't be here were it not for you over there. Dr. Whitaker, what's a path forward? Is Dr. Whitaker still there? Well, I can tell you what. This is what I think. I think, I hope you will continue these programs, Dwight. I think we have got to create and craft programs for young women, because our young Black women are being left behind. They too are struggling under, not just under racism, but under misogyny. Black women are absolutely invisible. We are. And we have got to save our children. Our Latino children have to be saved. Our Asian children have to be saved. When you listen to our Asian brothers and sisters talk about being the readily identifiable other and the racism that they have to deal with, those who are clear and who are not trying to pass, we have to have alliances. And we have to, critical race theory, please, it's just telling the truth. Just stop all that. Stop all these labels. It's telling the truth. It's telling the truth. You know, I don't want to talk to General Custer about what happened to Native Americans. I want to talk to indigenous people. They know what happened. And they're going to tell the truth. And guess what? If they don't tell the truth, all those bones buried up under those schools are telling the truth. You cannot bury the truth. It's going to crush to the earth. It's going to rise. That's what it does. Everybody, it's going to rise. Lies die. Truth will rise. Always. So I love you, everybody. Dwight McKee, do you want to say anything else before we go?
We're good to go.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you and Pastor Hatch are doing. It means so much. And I hope that you run for a school board seat, Attorney Jones. No, he's like, give me one more job. Why don't you? That is not what I need. I love everybody. I can't wait to be with you tomorrow. Thank you for bearing with us. I don't know what happened with StreamYard. I don't know. But you know, you had no luck yesterday speaking with the principal. You have to keep at it, Marilyn, but call back tomorrow and we're going to talk again. Okay. All right. This is not a one-shot deal. You have to keep on pushing. Trust me. Love you, everybody. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show.